Imagine a forgotten grave in the heart of Berlin, where grass grows over the earth and the silence seems absolute. But behind that stillness lies a story shrouded in mystery, legend, and shadow. The grave belongs to none other than Reinhard Heydrich, the Butcher of Prague, one of the most feared men in the Nazi regime. Decades after his death, the site again drew attention, not from historians, but from unidentified individuals who, on a freezing night in December 2019, opened the grave. Their motive remains unknown. What might have been hidden beside the remains of one of the architects of the Holocaust? A legendary sword? Nazi relics of incalculable value? Or simply the emptiness left behind by a man who embodied absolute evil? Today, we delve into this mystery. Before we begin, we are on the road to 1 million subscribers. It may seem far away, but with your help, we can get there. Subscribe now, leave a like, and become part of this story. The Reich's executioner. Who was Reinhard Heydrich? Reinhard Heydrich was not just another officer in the complex hierarchy of the Third Reich. He held a singular, almost untouchable position. He was regarded not only as Heinrich Himmler's right-hand man, but also as the mind behind many of the mechanisms of repression that kept the regime functioning. While Hitler provided the charisma and ideological vision, and Himmler managed the SS structure, Heydrich was the meticulous executor, the man who took abstract orders and turned them into concrete plans, transforming ideas of domination into practical policies of extermination. Under his direct authority stood 3 fundamental pillars of Nazi terror: the Gestapo, the secret police tasked with crushing all opposition and creating a permanent climate of paranoia; the SD, the intelligence service that monitored not only external enemies but German citizens themselves, infiltrating every level of society; and the Kripo, the criminal police, which served as an auxiliary arm in the persecution of those deemed undesirable. Heydrich did not see them as independent institutions, but as components of a single machine, coordinated with near military precision, whose ultimate purpose was to maintain order through fear and eliminate any threat to Nazi rule. As Reich protector of Bohemia and Moravia, regions that now form part of the Czech Republic, he ruled through a rare combination of administrative calculation and overt brutality. His policy of repression was not only ruthless, but designed to set an example. Every act of resistance, however minor, was crushed through public executions staged as spectacles of intimidation, mass deportations that tore entire communities apart, and psychological terror that kept the population under constant strain. It was not long before the local people gave him the nickname, the Butcher of Prague. Yet his cruelty was not confined to the occupation of Czechoslovakia. Reinhard Heydrich was one of the chief architects of the so-called Final Solution, the project that would lead to the systematic murder of millions of Jews across Europe. As chairman of the Wannsee Conference in January 1942, he was tasked with organizing, down to the smallest logistical detail, the machinery of deportation and extermination. This was not simply a policy of hatred, but a bureaucratically structured operation. Trains, timetables, sorting centers, extermination camps. His ability to turn genocide into tables, reports, and official orders made him the embodiment of administrative rationality in the service of barbarism. A study in contrasts, Reinhard Heydrich presented himself as a refined man. He played the violin masterfully, the result of musical training begun in his youth. He was also a skilled pilot, capable of flying fighter aircraft with precision. He cultivated the image of an educated, elegant, sophisticated figure. At official receptions, his manners were impeccable. He spoke of literature, classical music, and sport, conveying the impression of a modern aristocrat. Yet this cultural veneer only sharpened the gulf between his private life and his role as an architect of death. It showed how barbarism could hide behind the mask of civilization, existing alongside it in perfect symmetry. Hitler saw in him not merely a loyal subordinate, but a potential successor, young, ambitious, cruel, and efficient. His discipline, coldness, and ability to make swift decisions deeply impressed Adolf Hitler, who saw in Heydrich a spirit of steel, ruthless and free of moral hesitation. Himmler, for his part, regarded him as indispensable. If Himmler was the meticulous ideologue of the SS, Heydrich was its pragmatic executor, capable of turning Nazism's darkest visions into administrative reality. Alongside Hitler and Himmler, he formed the Triad of Terror, serving as the invisible mind behind countless operations of the regime. Few figures embodied the Third Reich's most lethal qualities so completely. The fusion of radical ideology, military efficiency, and bureaucratic calculation. It was the modern state, with all its capacity for organization, record-keeping, and logistics, placed in the service of mass destruction. Heydrich was the face of that machinery, mathematical coldness applied to extermination. In short, he was the embodiment of Nazism's murderous efficiency, proof that modernity did not prevent barbarism, but could be shaped to magnify it. But no tyranny lasts forever, and in Reinhard Heydrich's case, his time of absolute power would end unexpectedly and explosively, in a spring that would change the fate of Nazi occupation in Europe. The death of Reinhard Heydrich, the ambush of May 27, 1942, on the outskirts of Prague. The sun shone over the city, but its light seemed incapable of lifting the shadow hanging over the Nazi-occupied Czech capital. Under constant surveillance, the streets moved to a strange, almost artificial rhythm shaped by the presence of terror. Yet, beneath that forced routine, a spark of resistance remained hidden. That morning, it was about to set the course of history ablaze. At a strategic point on the road, at a sharp bend, two men waited in silence. Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš, Czechoslovak agents meticulously trained by British intelligence, had returned to their homeland on a mission with incalculable consequences. They were to eliminate Reinhard Heydrich, Reich protector of Bohemia and Moravia, mastermind of the final solution, and the man most feared in Nazi Germany after Hitler and Himmler. There was no turning back. Success would mean vengeance and hope. Failure meant certain death. Their target approached in his dark green open-top Mercedes-Benz convertible, as though parading through the middle of a war zone. It was a calculated display of arrogance. Heydrich believed himself untouchable, the absolute master of occupied territory. Unlike other Nazi leaders, he dispensed with military escorts. To him, the local population's blind obedience and fear were the best protection. That excessive confidence, which many saw as a display of power, would prove to be his greatest vulnerability. As the car slowed for the bend, Gabčík emerged from hiding, raised his Sten submachine gun, and aimed directly at the chest of the Butcher of Prague. The world seemed to hold its breath. But the improbable happened. The weapon failed, jamming at the decisive moment. For an instant, the stunned Heydrich reacted with the audacity of an officer trained in brutality. He ordered his driver, Johannes Klein, to stop the vehicle. Then he drew his Luger pistol and, rather than flee, tried to confront the attackers alone. That gesture, born of bravado and overconfidence, would trigger his downfall. Realizing that his companion's weapon had failed, Jan Kubiš acted within seconds. He pulled an anti-tank grenade adapted for hand use from his briefcase and hurled it at Heydrich's car with all his strength. The projectile exploded violently, tearing apart the bodywork and sending up a cloud of smoke and shrapnel that embedded itself in the Nazi officer's body. Fragments of metal and leather penetrated deep into his lungs, spleen, and diaphragm, while the driver remained at the wheel.
Even in agony, Heydrich tried to respond. Staggering and covered in blood, he attempted to climb from the car and raise his weapon as though he could still impose his authority. But his strength failed him, and he soon collapsed to the ground.
It was the perfect image of the fall of a man who believed himself indestructible. Rushed to a hospital in Prague, Heydrich underwent emergency surgery. Local doctors, under pressure from the Nazis, and specialists sent from Berlin, took turns in a frantic struggle to save Hitler's iron heart. For hours, they removed fragments of metal, glass, and upholstery that had penetrated his body. At first, it appeared he would survive. He was conscious, received visitors, and even spoke, confident that he would recover. But the reality was different. Infection spread through his internal wounds, and antibiotics could not stop the septicemia. Gradually, his fever rose, breathing became difficult, and the body that symbolized the cold efficiency of Nazism was consumed from within. On the 4th of June, 1942, after 8 days of agony, Reinhard Heydrich succumbed. He died in Prague, the city he had ruled with an iron fist, leaving behind a legacy of blood and terror. For Hitler, it was the loss of one of his most valuable men. For the Czechs, the end of an executioner. For history, proof that even the most powerful are not immune to fate. Hitler's response was immediate and devastating. Heydrich's funeral became a spectacle of power. Hitler and Himmler demanded vengeance without limits. The attack on Heydrich would be punished with terror on a national scale. SS and Gestapo units spread across Bohemia and Moravia, executing thousands of civilians without trial. Mere suspicion or a denunciation was enough to justify death. The villages of Lidice and Ležáky became symbols of this fury. In Lidice, every man was shot. The women were deported to camps such as Ravensbrück, and the children were separated. Many were killed, while others were sent for Germanization. Homes and churches were destroyed, and the village's name itself was erased from maps. Ležáky suffered the same fate, razed to ashes. Meanwhile, Heydrich's funeral was staged as a display of power. In Prague, his coffin was carried through the streets in a military procession, followed by the SS and watched by the population in enforced silence. Later, in Berlin, the ceremony reached its climax at Hitler's new Reich Chancellery. Surrounded by torches and banners, Adolf Hitler awarded the dead man the German Order, praising him as a man with a heart of iron. Beside the coffin, his 2 sons, dressed in miniature SS uniforms, symbolized the future being shaped by the Reich. The burial took place at Berlin's Invalidenfriedhof cemetery, marked by rifle volleys and a temporary cross. Hitler promised a grand mausoleum after the final victory, a promise that was never fulfilled. With the Nazi defeat, Heydrich faded into obscurity. His grave remained modest and silent until, decades later, it became an object of curiosity and mystery. Before we continue, make sure you are subscribed, leave a like, and turn on notifications whenever we publish new videos. Support our work by commenting, "I want more stories." That shows us you are enjoying the content and helps more people discover productions like this. Done that? Then prepare to find out what happened to Reinhard Heydrich's grave. The tomb. The end of the Third Reich, May 1945. The Third Reich was collapsing for good. Soviet troops were advancing relentlessly through the smoking ruins of Berlin, bringing with them the fury of vengeance accumulated after years of war and atrocities. Symbols of Nazism were torn from the streets, monuments blown up, imperial eagles smashed apart with sledgehammers. The grand avenues that had once staged SS victory marches and the choreographed displays of power conceived by Goebbels were now filled with tanks, soldiers, and heaps of rubble. The city that had for years flaunted the architectural grandeur envisioned by Hitler and the iron discipline of his men had become a mass of wreckage, a landscape of ash and silence, broken only by the distant thunder of the final battles. Amid this atmosphere of collapse, not even the dead escaped history's judgment. The graves of Nazi leaders were violated, crosses torn down, memorials erased. Among the targets was Reinhard Heydrich, whose body had rested at Berlin's Invalids Cemetery since 1942. The simple wooden cross marking his grave was ruthlessly removed, erasing any visible reference to the man who, years earlier, had been hailed by the regime as a hero and martyr. The site thus faded into obscurity, reduced to an anonymous patch of ground among thousands of uncelebrated graves. With the construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961, the cemetery became isolated in the eastern sector under the strict control of the East German authorities. Heydrich's grave, with no visible marker, became even less accessible. With no name, no date, and no inscription, it remained only an indistinct patch of bare earth, invisible to any visitor. Yet the grave's exact location remained known and documented. For decades, silence and dust covered that piece of ground. A place once intended to immortalize one of the Nazi regime's most feared men vanished from collective memory, as though the earth itself had swallowed the past. The desecration. In December 2019, 77 years after Reinhard Heydrich's death, the heavy silence hanging over his grave was abruptly broken. On a freezing night, shrouded in thick darkness, shadows moved discreetly through Berlin's military cemetery. Still unidentified individuals began a precise excavation at the exact spot where the Butcher of Prague had lain for decades. Their identity and motive were never established. The police report, dry and bureaucratic, recorded only the essentials. The grave had been opened, but nothing had been removed. No confirmed breach of the coffin, no stolen objects, no clear evidence. Everything indicated that the intruders had been interrupted midway through their mission, forced to hastily abandon an operation they had been preparing for a long time. What was clear to investigators, however, was that this had not been improvised. The excavation was surgical, guided by precise information about the grave's location and nature. After all, Heydrich was not buried as an ordinary man. As an SS Obergruppenführer, he was given a solemn funeral, full of Nazi symbolism and pomp. His body was placed in a reinforced coffin, dressed in full SS uniform and adorned with the decorations he had worn in life. For decades, rumors have persisted that an honor sword lay alongside his remains, a personal gift from Heinrich Himmler, reserved for only a select few officers of the Nazi elite. If it existed, it would be a rare item, potentially valuable to clandestine collectors and on the black market for Third Reich relics. More than that, a legend persists among historians and treasure hunters that Himmler himself, in an act of devotion or superstition, placed his own sword beside Heinrich's coffin, as if seeking to seal forever the memory of his favorite protege. If true, such an object would become a macabre relic, laden with meaning, not only because of the personal bond between the two men, but also as material testimony to the fanaticism that shaped the Nazi machine. The precision of the excavation fueled speculation, but revealed neither what the intruders had been seeking nor their motive. And when police arrived, all they found was a desecrated grave, forced open but shrouded in an unsettling silence. What were they looking for? What prevented them from finishing the job? Questions that remained unanswered. The site was sealed off again, returned to anonymity and enforced oblivion. Yet the mystery still hangs in the air. What lies beside Reinhard Heydrich's bones? Original uniforms? Authentic medals? Himmler's legendary sword? Or nothing more than the cold, fragile remains of a man who, in life, embodied absolute evil? There is a cruel irony in this ending. Heydrich, who spent his days controlling every detail, calculating every gesture, and ruling the fates of millions with an iron hand, continues to generate speculation, greed, and fear decades after his death. His reign left a trail of destruction and blood. His grave, by contrast, holds only silence, shadows, and a mystery that may never be solved. In the end, history raised no monuments to him and granted him no lasting tributes. What remains are memories of horror and deep scars that will not fade. And it is in this invisible realm of memory, not in an anonymous patch of ground in Berlin, that justice against Reinhard Heydrich continues to be done. Day after day, generation after generation. What did you think of today's video? Had you already heard the story of Heydrich's grave? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to check that you're subscribed, leave a like, and turn on notifications. Thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. But don't go just yet. Another incredible video is appearing on your screen. Click and watch it now. See you there.